Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for watching. I've got guys an update on a major winter storm threat that we have brewing for the central and eastern United States. All right, we're expecting a lot of cold air to come down from Canada through the northern United States. It could definitely give us a big shot at seeing some major winter storms across the eastern United States. Got all the details coming right up, right? So thank you for joining me here on this Monday evening. We have a lot to talk about in this video as we will be going over the latest details on a pretty historic Arctic blast that we are expecting to bring many opportunities for snow for some of these areas across the eastern United States. So we're going to start it here. Take a look at your current radar. You can see we have two things going on right now. We have a pretty big storm system stretching here over portions of the central plains and into sections of the Midwest here. That is bringing some showers and storms across portions of the Midwest. And then we also do have some of that backside snowfall in sections of Nebraska and northern Kansas that will likely continue over the next couple hours, still producing some of those showers and storms as that does drift over to the east. Okay, we also do have some light snow showers moving across sections of far upstate New York into the interior northeast. All right, this is from kind of the backside of that storm system that moved through last night. But other than that, the country looks pretty dry for the most part, so we're going to be moving on to our alerts here. So starting out here into sections of southern Florida, you can see we do have some dense fog advisories stretching from portions of central Florida all the way down to southern Florida near the Keys. Okay, if you go over here to western Texas in the pink shade here, we have a red flag warning. Okay, that does also extend into sections of eastern New Mexico and far eastern Colorado there. So you definitely have dry conditions, but also very windy conditions. So that's just going to create a very hazardous kind of environment there for that fire danger. You also do have that high wind warning going out for sections of eastern Colorado there. So that also kind of does cope with the dry conditions. That kind of just does create that hazardous fire conditions out there. We also do have some wind advisories going out for sections of far eastern Tennessee, those mountainous regions of Tennessee. We also do have some wind advisory across sections of southern and central Kansas. All right, you can see also in the purple shade, we do have some winter weather advisory. It's going out for sections of northern Nebraska, southern South Dakota, into portions of the Pacific Northwest. There are also the mountainous regions of the western United States, including portions of northern Idaho into sections of Montana. And then also we do have some winter storm watches going out for sections of upstate New York, like the Watertown region, all the way down towards Erie, Pennsylvania. Okay, definitely some lake effect snow is expected to start kicking in as we will see some of that northern stream energy really start to produce some of those higher totals. So that's definitely going to be something that we're going to need to watch out for over the next couple of days. All right, so moving on here, we're going to take a look at the GFS. We're going to look at basically what the GFS has been showing as far as our big snow signal, and then we'll compare the GFS with its snow totals to the European model for its outlook for the next couple of days, and also with its snow totals. Okay, so starting out here, take a look at the 18Z run of the GFS here. So this is what we got going on right now. You got a lot of cold air that's starting to work its way down south of your 540 lines, pretty much into the central United States, but you can see our storm system is kind of moving through and going over to the eastern United States. But watch what happens as after we do get a couple pieces of energy to fly through here. This one piece of energy does come down through the central United States and acts almost like a very weak clipper and just brings a lot of little to no snowfall here across sections of the eastern United States. This would only bring an inch or two, maybe 1 to 3 inches at best here for sections of the Ohio Valley and the eastern United States, but behind it, it brings so much cold air, and all of a sudden, we've pretty much flipped from a positive NAO to a negative NAO. You have a huge dip in the jet stream here, and then you have your huge ridge here building into the western United States. So you have Arctic air that's coming down from Canada here that's really starting to make everything cold in the eastern United States, where you also do have a very active jet stream. So this is going to be a pattern that we need to watch out for possible snowfall. And we do get that next system to come in from the northwestern United States, and that does end up running the jet stream, and it does connect with some Gulf low that does pop up here right around the Texas Panhandle. And this is when we're getting to the January 5th to 8th time frame. This is when things could get pretty interesting for portions of the central and eastern United States, where all models really have been showing a signal for a pretty substantial winter storm and also a pretty southern hitting winter storm as well. So you can see as we get into the 5th, which should be this should be Saturday, or this is Sunday afternoon here. All right, so this is about just under a week out. All right, you do have a lot of snowfall breaking out here across sections of the northern United States, but look at this ice and freezing rain cross sections of Arkansas into sections of Kansas. Okay, this is definitely going to be interesting to talk about, and it's not something that you look at and say there's no way that's happening, because look how far south your cold air is getting. You're going to get shots of cold air and more cold air that could definitely make some of these scenarios happen. So we put this in motion here, and this continues to really expand. And look at what happens here by our 540 line. We have a major ice storm for portions of northern and central Arkansas. This would bring major ice accumulations. Obviously, really, really tough travel there, but that does spread into portions of Missouri there, and it does actually eventually kind of turn over that snowfall. But we see heavy, moderate to heavy snowfall breaking out across the northern portion of the United States here, with some possible strong to severe storms. You'd say across sections of Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, not a forecast. This is just take a look at what the signal is and kind of just what the scenario would play out as. But possible severe weather across Texas and Oklahoma, an ice storm for portions of Arkansas, and then a major winter storm for areas points north here behind that 540 line. And so that kind of continues to move over to the eastern United States, and that does bring some of that ice with it. So that does spread into sections of Tennessee there. Okay, the Appalachian Mountain region there, and that kind of does spread into the upper elevations of North Carolina and maybe even into northern Georgia and South Carolina. It's very possible, depending on the position of the storm. It's not too far out. It's a little far out, though, but it's not too far out, about 168 hours out at this very frame. Okay, but we are watching this very closely because this has been a pretty big signal from most models, especially the GFS here. Okay, so in this particular run, this has kind of that low pressure center moving through southern Illinois here, so that means that anywhere north of there is guaranteed to get snowfall. And so you see a lot of snow across the Midwest. I will say, if you're anywhere in the Midwest, mainly really especially the upper Midwest, you're almost guaranteed to see snow for most of these snowstorms, or for most of these winter storms, or unless they track north. So that's really what the theme of this pattern will be. And you can actually see some of that cold air really trying to keep the warm air farther south. We actually do have high pressure here by where that warm air is, so that's going to help keep all of this cold air pretty far south. And so that low pressure system is going to kind of ride the jet stream, and that's where you could get the scenario of seeing some mid-Atlantic and 995 corridor snowfall. And so we push this in motion a little bit forward, play this out, and the storm does end up weakening a little bit. But we still have definitely some pretty substantial snowfall across the Great Lakes region here, and then we also do have some of this rainfall across sections of the southeastern coastline here. So definitely not the kind of winter storm that you would be hoping for, but it does end up bringing some snowfall to portions of the eastern United States. But really, the main event is looking to be across really the central United States here. We're really watching this area here for heavy precipitation. Either it could be severe weather, there could be heavy snowfall, or even just heavy freezing rain. But there's definitely going to be some pretty hazardous conditions here, and obviously that heavy snowfall would bring reduced visibility, but also the freezing rain would really bring slick travel, and most people would probably not expect it that far south into portions of Arkansas. But I mean, with cold air, this is pretty far south. So with cold air this far south, I'm telling you, it's certainly possible. And also just the fact that the GFS has been really showing the signal for the past couple of runs. So I do also want to take a look here at the 60 GFS real quick before we go back. This particular run has been really ramping up on every storm here, and I'll tell you why. Okay, I also want to say, when things get this far out, it can only be 100. It could be just about 150 hours out, and then things just go haywire. But that's because the models do with this when they're in panic mode, and they kind of glitch out, if you want to put it that way. And that's kind of whatever happens when you get a huge Arctic blast that you're anticipating to happen. And then, so whenever the model picks up on a possible storm system, it always shows that kind of exploding into a major winter storm. So that's kind of what we see here, but not that far out. This is only 162 hours out. This storm we just looked at, and look how more substantial it is, bring a lot of heavy snowfall, and it gets very heavy at times with a ton of ice, freezing rain, sleet, and snow. Just a nasty wintry mix here, breaking out across sections of the interior, mid-Atlantic, and northeast. This would be a more kind of worst case scenario for this particular storm, and that just delivers a lot of snowfall there to the northeast in general. But watch what happens behind it. That cold air really starts to set in, and you get a pretty wild scenario here where you get a very very extremely far south storm system here. I mean, this is just really a perfect scenario here for a major nor'easter. I mean, you have just I mean, this is going to be obviously a historic Arctic blast, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay, but you have cold air down to your 540 lines down to the Gulf of Mexico. You also have a very strong Gulf flow here that's starting to connect with some northern stream energy. So everything is going right for this to turn into a major nor'easter. And you guessed it, that's exactly what happens here. And the fact, and this already is producing snowfall as this is still about to move up the East Coast. It's still not even out of the Gulf of Mexico, and you're seeing snowfall. You're seeing snow in the Gulf of Mexico right now. So you're getting buoys in the Gulf of Mexico are literally getting snowed on in this scenario here. This is how wild the GFS can be over 250 hours out with a major Arctic blast anticipated. This moves up into the East Coast, and this brings a full on blizzard to the eastern United States. I mean, this is producing just the craziest snow rates that we've ever seen across portions of southern New England and the mid Atlantic. I mean, this is just an unheard of scenario. This is just would be kind of a once in a generation, I guess not a generation, but once in a long time kind of scenario here where we just see an absolute blizzard across all of the eastern United States here, kind of the perfect scenario for snow lovers there. But this is just an absolutely fairy tale kind of scenario here. So, not a forecast at all. For those of you that thought this was a forecast, I'm sorry to kind of burst your bubble there, but there's no way that this is a forecast. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that is 288 hours out with a huge Arctic blast expected. So definitely not the best time frame to rely on with the GFS there. Okay, but definitely very cold air. This is something that we can definitely take away from the GFS and note that it's possible where you get cold air this far south. That 540 line might not make it all the way down to Tampa, but you could argue that it's going to make it pretty close to the Gulf of Mexico. So that is something that we need to consider. But a scenario like this, probably not. But what this also does show is that there's a pretty large signal in the GFS for a major coastal storm sometime in this time frame. Now, I know it's very far out, granted that we're 258 hours out. But the fact that we see something like this pretty often, which we've been seeing for the past runs, I'm not going to go all the way back, but we've been seeing similar scenarios like this, especially up the East Coast in the similar time frame. Okay, that's just a signal from the GFS that is really picking up on for a something or some kind of a major East Coast winter storm. It could be snow, could be freezing rain, could be all rain, but something definitely is brewing here for the East Coast. But it's probably not going to be to this magnitude, and that is probably you could say a historic blizzard there. So I just want to show you guys that, especially there for the for kind of just giving you guys a background or kind of some context here on what the on what kind of the scenario is right now. But you take this out a little bit further back to the 18Z GFS. This is the evening run that came out a little bit earlier. This is what we were just looking at. So this is after our upcoming ice storm kind of moves through. Look what happens as we get more energy that come from the northern stream. This dips down very far south, and it makes it this far south because that 540 line is already placed so far south that you see this snow pretty much freely drift all the way down to where that 540 line and 546 line meet, where that freezing mark is, and that actually does end up bringing snow all the way down to the Texas Panhandle, and all of a sudden you've got snow really close to the Texas and Mexico border there. So pretty unheard of area to see snowfall, but this case in the this exact run, the GFS does have that, and I will say it has been showing that for a lot of runs, not only today but for the past couple days. It's been showing something like this happening in Texas, where you get snow very far south, and that's what we see here. And then once again, it tries to do something with that same low up the East Coast. Now, it doesn't bring that full-on blizzard like the 60 run did, but it still shows a signal for that because it shows that low bringing this huge, block of cold air down from Canada. It shows that low with good position. It does show some northern stream energy. So this is all something we're kind of putting the pieces to the puzzle together, and it's going to take a few weeks. It's probably going to take a week or two before we get everything set in stone. But you can kind of see on each run where the different pieces of the puzzle are going to fit, and that's kind of what we're trying to see here on all runs of the GFS. So you kind of see that same low pressure placement, but it does fail to connect because that northern stream energy isn't as strong as what the 60 should, but still brings that robust cold air all the way down to the Tampa area, which also is pretty wild. All right, but take this out even further. I mean, this is really this is fairyland here, but you get kind of the same idea. You just get more and more cold air. So really, what you got to take away from this is that there is a huge signal for cold air. You're going to get a lot of energy to fly through the country, and if that energy, kind of connects with there's going to be that one thing that's going to really boost this one piece of energy, and if that does actually happen with this cold air nearby, there's the way you're going to get a massive snowstorm. But I'm going to tell you right now, there is a big chance that we're going to get some big hitting snowstorms in this part of the country. This part of the country needs to be ready and aware of the fact that there is a very high chance that we're going to see most likely at least one major, relatively major winter storm. Okay, so once again, not a forecast with this, but also I do want to show this very quickly because there is a very large signal on the models, so it is worth looking at the snow totals. And you notice I have not put this out all the way to where the run completely goes out, so I have not put this to all the 384 hours. Stopped it right around the 200-hour mark, only because right around 200 hours or past 200 hours, that's when the GFS really starts to show that wild scenarios, and so that's really when everything just becomes completely unreliable. So what you're taking away from this is not exact forecast totals, just kind of highlighting where areas may end up with the higher totals in general. But we're not looking at specific totals, kind of just saying like, oh, southern Missouri, we're going to see 17 inches of snow. That's not what we're saying here. We're just saying, oh, look, the GFS has higher totals in Missouri. That's something to watch out for there. So, you can see, if you look at the western United States, all right, these mountainous regions will definitely probably stay active, but you can see that definitely that signal for a bit of a snow drought is there because a lot of the western United States is starting to dry up there on your totals, and for those non-mountainous regions, those totals definitely aren't as robust. And even for the upper elevations, you don't see many areas getting past 30 inches of snow, and it's pretty uncommon for this time of year to see less than 30 inches of snow in those peaks. So uh, you could even see that signal pretty well on the mountainous regions there. But you flip things over to the eastern United States, you can see those colors really start to get a little bit. They start to pop at you a little bit more. We have a pretty good streak of snowfall here across the Midwest. This is kind of similar to the area we're talking about now. I do think the lower Midwest and the Great Plains will be a big area to watch for heavy snowfall totals here, but you can see a lot of that, 5 to 10 inch range, not a forecast, but it kind of gives you the sense of, definitely a signal for a couple winter storms, maybe a little bit more on the minor side, but definitely a couple quick hitting winter storms to move through. Also, like the Northeast is very busy here on this case in the GFS. Okay, even towards the coastline, definitely could see some relatively major storms. Now, we're not putting this all the way out, so you're not seeing those higher totals along the coast, but if we were, you'd probably see those totals ramp up. Actually, you do see that right here, as I did accidentally push that out. But you look at the 12Z, this is the afternoon run, and just to kind of show you that things are so, model agreement is very, very harsh out here, or not harsh, I should say, but, a good term for that is just to say model agreement is very different. So there's a lot of, there isn't much model agreement, what you can say here, because if you look at, different runs here of the GFS, things can change completely. You don't see that Texas snow anymore. You do not see snow anywhere near the Gulf Coast. You see snow for pretty much just a little portion of the northern United States, and then you go to the 60, and all heck breaks loose here, and all of a sudden it's a winter wonderland for everybody. And yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of different possible scenarios that could play out. So really, we're just kind of watching what each run shows, and once we get kind of a model or just a day or two of pretty consistent agreement there, that's when we can start looking at it like, okay, this is something that we're going to need to watch out for. All right, so we're going to move on here to the European model. Also going to take a look at what the European model is looking like for its outlook. So the European model does only go 200 or actually it does go 360 hours out. So we'll probably stop at about the 280 or so hour mark there. But starting out here, you can see with our upcoming ice storm across, portions of Arkansas that we saw in the GFS, was the European model show, well, it still shows that signal for that storm. So you could say that there's definitely a high chance, at least from the models, that we're going to get some sort of a low pressure system move through. But a lot of that wintry precipitation is still definitely showing up there in the European model for sections of the Great Plains, including portions of northern Missouri, Iowa, portions of Kansas, Nebraska, even into South Dakota there. Right, but also notice that that low pressure placement is a little bit farther north. So that does bring the warm sector pretty far north there. And so you don't see snow for southern Missouri and don't see snow or freezing rain to Arkansas. You kind of just see that freezing rain where that freezing mark is all the way up in the central and northern portions of Missouri there. So you can see just a little bit of a difference there in that low pressure placement can change the whole event for some people. But you take this a little bit further, and this does bring that snow into portions of Illinois and the rest of the Midwest, and that moves into the Northeast. But remember how the GFS had that falling apart? Well, that same storm does make it all the way, and it does continue to maintain its strength there, and it even gets a little bit stronger, down to 997 millibars. And all of a sudden, you've got a pretty favorable looking storm system for the Mid Atlantic here, because you have very far south hitting cold air, and that low pressure is going to just ride the jet stream. So if it continues to move, where the jet stream is, I mean, that's lining up to be a pretty good winter storm for DC, Philly, New York City, Boston. I mean, this could definitely bring some good totals for you guys. And that's kind of what we see here, where we do see a pocket of heavy snow break out of sections, across sections of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delmarva, even as far south as Southern Virginia there. And that does end up moving out. But, if that's a little bit farther south, or excuse me, a little bit farther north, then we're probably not going to see that snowfall into Arkansas and or I guess that freezing rain there. Okay, but definitely still a possibility for sections of the Northeast and even the Mid Atlantic to get in on some of that snowfall. But you can see how close that difference is, where the GFS had more of, I guess, a rainy scenario here for the Northeast. Well, the European model has more of a snowier scenario, and that low pressure placement difference on the models is very, very small. So that kind of just goes to show that, just a little difference in where the storm is can change a lot. So that's just something to kind of consider and kind of keep in the back of your mind. But you look at what the rest of the model shows, and you do see some of that Texas snowfall, which is pretty wild. But look how far south that's, also getting there. All right, you see snow as far south as the Houston area. I mean, this is really far south, near the Gulf of Mexico, and you just see a lot of that northern stream energy come along with this massive Arctic blast there, and eventually it does kind of consolidate into a Gulf low, and you've got kind of the right environment here, because you have cold air everywhere here, even in the western United States. But your jet stream is, I mean, look at this. Your jet stream is so far south that really any piece of energy or any precipitation that moves in the central or eastern United States at all is going to be snow. That's pretty much guaranteed. I don't know why this model says we're seeing rain in Canada, but that is snow. So if you see rain on the model behind like the 540 line, like all the way up here for say like in Illinois, okay, keep in mind that that's definitely not rain. That is certainly snow. So I know some models have been showing that, but that's probably just a glitch or an error. But keep going with this model here, and you do see still that Texas snow continuing. It does spread into central Texas, and that's kind of another wild scenario there. You get freezing rain, the Florida Panhandle, and then that kind of just tries to move up the East Coast. But there again, that's on a different model too, where you see agreement there with a possible East Coast low pressure. So I think that what we can say is that after this next winter storm comes through with that possible ice storm, the major main Arctic blast is going to move through with a pretty substantial piece of energy from the northern stream, and that's going to get that's going to kickstart our possible major southern hitting winter storm. So I think this time frame, January 7th to the 10th, is what we need to keep an eye on for a possible long term and long range winter storm there for areas that might not usually see snow during the winter time. So pretty wild stuff from the GFS and European model. You look at the European model here for your snow totals, just kind of once again give you guys a sense of what areas may need to be highlighted for the highest upcoming totals here. And you see a long streak here of pretty substantial totals across the Midwest, the Great Plains and eventually into the Northeast here, and that's really just kind of that line that you see with that behind the 540 line, meaning behind your cold front, and that's pretty much where you're going to see that snowfall with our upcoming system. And then if you were to keep this going, if you were to put this a little bit farther out, you do see that snow in Texas. I mean, if that scenario were to play out, which it's very unlikely to see snow over this far south, even with our upcoming pattern, but I think that snow to this magnitude into like areas a little bit farther north, I think it's possible because we are gonna get to it in a bit, but that cold air is going to get very, very far south. Like that 540 line may reach the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not, joking with you guys. It's going to get extremely far south. So what I'm saying here is that we might not see 8 to 10 inches of snow all the way down to southern Texas, but we may see similar totals. Maybe into Oklahoma or into like northern Louisiana and Arkansas. I think it's something like that is certainly possible with this pattern. And we're not obviously still definitely not forecasting. This is not a forecast, but once again, definitely below average snowfall for those upper elevations in the west. But the central and eastern United States are they're going to get very, very active for snowfall here because that's where your cold air is going to be, and that's pretty much where the coldest of air will eventually kind of come down through. So you move over here to the Climate Prediction Center. This is their 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. This is what really caught everyone's eye. They have added a 90 to 100% chance of below average temperatures across sections of northern Georgia, portions of Alabama, northeastern Mississippi, all of Tennessee, and most of southern and central Kentucky there. All right, so if you're in this very dark purple or bluish shade here, you have a pretty much a 100% chance of seeing at least below average temperatures here. So this really is a screaming signal from the models and the Climate Prediction Center, which is from NOAA. It's official, thing here. All right, that you're gonna get a huge area of far below average temperatures, and you see how far south that is. That could end up being pretty close to where a 540 line ends up at its at this Arctic blast peak here. But you still have a 80 to 90% chance. That's very broad, extending from the Gulf Coast all the way from Florida all the way up to the Ohio Valley into southern New England into the lower Midwest. And then you still have some very high chances of below average temperatures for those surrounding areas as well. Okay, so major Arctic blast expected, but this is going to be for widespread areas this time. Okay, but this honestly is going to be this is just such a big signal from the Climate Prediction Center that really tells you that you can safely say that there are going to be some areas out here, maybe farther south than you would ever expect them to see snow. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that even from this, just looking at this, it tells you that if you get any piece of energy or precipitation to move through, there's going to be a decent chance that is going to end up being snow, and it could definitely bring some snow pretty far south. So we're going to move on here to the GFS, looking at your temperature anomaly. So this basically shows us how much above average your temperatures are, how much below average they are. And so you can see right now, as of right now, you're in a very warm pattern here. This is most likely a positive NAO phase where you get a pretty big ridge here in the eastern United States, and the western United States is kind of cooled off there with above average amount of snowfall. Watch as that first Arctic blast moves in, and that whole pattern flips. All of this warm air, you're getting close to 20 to 30 degrees below, above average. All of that warm air shoots up into Canada, and there it goes right up into the polar vortex. Now, the polar vortex is very, very weak, meaning that the kind of the polar jet stream is very wavy and unstable, and it kind of collapses down on us. And this is what we call a Arctic outbreak. And this automatically just brings a ton of cold air shooting down here into the central United States. And this lines up perfectly all of a sudden with the Climate Prediction Center's outlook right around January 4th to the 10th, which is that time frame we're watching for that major winter storm. And so there's your first Arctic blast that kind of kicks off and kickstarts your pattern flip. Here comes your second one. This would probably be the main one here, where you get down to as low as 30 degrees below your averages here across sections of the Dakotas into the upper Midwest. This would bring below zero temperatures for some areas, and this just brings a ton of cold air in. Or this would probably be your main event here. This is when things could get really crazy. But look at this, guys. You have a clear pathway for all this cold air to come dumping here in through the eastern United States. You can't even see where your jet stream really ends here. Your 540 line at this point would probably be down past the Gulf of Mexico here. I mean, this is just going to be a downright historic event. Right, but this lines up pretty well, I'd say, with the Climate Prediction Center. So this, you could say, the GFS with your temperature anomalies is pretty favorable. All right, but this is just absolutely wild stuff that you see here, and if you were to continually run past 300 hours, you kind of see more of the same kind of stuff here, where you get more and more Arctic blasts. So a wild pattern setting up here. I mean, that's one, two, three, four, maybe even five major Arctic blasts throughout this run. Okay, so this is going to be a major pattern flip that will probably last for a long time, but this cold air is going to be potentially historically low there. And then for the last part of the update, you do look at what these wind chills would look like in this scenario, and this it goes to show how intense and how dangerous this cold air could be. I mean, you push this out a little bit further, and you're already seeing widespread areas well below zero with your real field temperatures. That's your wind chill out into central portions of Minnesota and into the Dakotas. This is not the actual temperature. This is what it feels like because of how cold the wind is making it. Okay, but look what happens as that coldest part of the kind of outbreak moves in. All right, you see some areas in Minnesota seeing temperatures as low as negative 40 degrees there, with it could feel like negative 40 degrees across Minnesota or the Dakotas if this exact scenario were to play out. So insanely cold air. I mean, this is going to be wild stuff, but you can see it feels like negative 42, and I mean, you get the idea. It's just going to be extremely cold, potentially historic. We really have not seen cold air to this magnitude in a long time, maybe not even of all of last year. So this is really going to be just a very favorable pattern for big time snowfall. But I mean, this is also going to be leading to dangerous cold air and pipe bursting cold air for many areas across the central and eastern United States. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you all for watching. I will see you guys next video. So if I don't post another video before the new year, Happy New Year to everybody. This has been a pretty incredible 2024. This channel, it's been huge for this channel. Obviously, severe weather was incredibly active. We just had so many great things happen on this channel. We had 1,000 subscribers. We were finally able to start going live again. All right, but it's been a pretty wild year, so I'll thank you guys right here just for a great year. All right, but I mean, 2025 is going to start out with a bang. I don't know why, but I remember last year we had the same kind of idea. We were stuck in a very warm pattern for the last portion of December, and then in January that whole pattern came collapsing down and kind of broke apart, and then we saw an Arctic outbreak just for the New Year. So I think that's going to be the same kind of scenario for 2025. All right, but I'm going to end off the video by saying the Eastern United States and Central United States is going to be in a very favorable pattern for snowstorms in the next couple of weeks. All right, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.